It's nice to look into the eyes of so many people who've traveled here, those who've come from other places, and those who've come home. Even though this isn't your home now, it still is a home in your heart. And I'm reminded that Mary's child somehow gets people to travel. The fourth Sunday of Advent is a reminder that one of the people caught up in the drama that we call the Christ Mass, Christmas, is a young Galilean peasant girl, probably no more than 14 or 15 years old. And we've made her very sweet, and we've made her the object of very lovely hymns, one of which you just sang. But Mary's child gets people moving. And I am thinking of a Christmas night so many, many decades ago. I was a student at St. Paul's University in Ottawa. I had promised my mom and dad I would come home for Christmas, and I had promised the bishop I'd come home and give an accounting for what I did with my first year of studying canon law. Those of you who know my relationship with my parents, I was actually more concerned about the trip to the bishop than I was with my parents for the first time in my life. And I remember Christmas night because you couldn't get a flight directly from Ottawa to New York in those days. You had to stop off in Montreal. And you probably all don't remember it, but there was a Christmas so many, many, many years ago. It was Christmas of '80. It was bitter cold in New York. You guys were having -6. Okay, that's what I flew into, and I remember how warm I felt. Because we left the tarmac in Montreal, and it was -44. All right, and the wind was whipping across that open field. If you've flown into Montreal, you know this. The wind comes across, there is nothing there to break the wind. And the cargo hold of our plane had frozen in the process of shutting. So we were stuck there until they could figure out how to either open it up, reshut it, or get us off the plane and put us on a new plane, a new flight that did not exist. Because I looked out the window, and I never get a window seat, but God wanted to teach me something. So I was sitting by the window, and I'm looking out, and I am looking at plane after plane after plane, and as far as the eye could see, the lineup of those getting de-iced before they could head out into the runway to take off because it was so bitterly cold. And I said, yeah, Mary's child has a way of really making traveling interesting. The readings you heard from Scripture are filled with hope and anticipation, something our world so desperately needs today. It's about ancient poetry and prophecy that's read and reread, and I want you to hear it. And a man named Micah, whom we know nothing about, we barely know when he lived, promises that God's anointed one is going to come from a village known as Bethlehem, from an ancient lineage. He'll be a ruler, but not a ruler as we understand rulers. He'll be more like a shepherd. He's going to actually care for the people under his care, and he's going to be a person who brings peace. And we're told today about a young Jewish girl who's unmarried and pregnant, and human beings being what they are, probably the object of gossip. And she can reflect through her eyes into the vision and poetry of the Hebrew Scriptures and see that she's now caught up in a role in a drama that she cannot possibly understand. And that's what makes her faith so wonderful. She really is a woman of faith despite her years. She is the daughter of Zion. And Scripture reminds us that a pregnancy once shrouded in mystery where God makes arrangements to redeem humanity because humanity is not capable of redeeming itself. That God keeps God's promises, and someday God's peace will be a reality. And that whenever we complain, as we often do, as I often do in my prayers, that you don't really know what it's like, God can say, I was a human, been there, done that. And this is the good news that needs to be shared. I honor this young girl, this daughter of Zion, because she has, as one of my professors once said many decades ago, she was given the paradox of blessedness. Blessed is she who believed that there would be a fulfillment of what was spoken to her by the Lord. Elizabeth's words that I read before, what a blessing. Think about it, okay? She is young, she is pregnant, she is not married, she is probably the object of scorn, and she will grow up to watch her adult son be murdered in a state-sanctioned execution. That's her blessing. She is chosen by God to wear not just a crown of joy, but a crown of sadness as well. But she's chosen, as we are chosen. Because as one of my great professors once told me, and I never gave him credit for this, but I will today, it's a reminder that God does choose us all. Not for comfort, but for ministry, and not for ease, but for service. That's what walking the Christian path is like. Jesus did come not to make our lives easy, but to make our lives great, because we can bring God's presence into the world. So we talk about Mary's son, and you hear the prayer that you all prayed with me. When Latin, it was translated, the opening words of the prayer, "My soul magnifies the Lord," Magnificat it's called. It's a Latin translation. You prayed her prayer. And when you hear the poetry, it is a call for revolution, because that's what the Christian message is. It is a call of revolution. If God truly scatters the proud in the thoughts of their hearts, then God has begun a moral revolution that says that human pride and human ego and the reality and evil of sin, as real as it hits us, does not have the final word or the final say. That's what the coming of Jesus is about. And if God has brought down the powerful and lifted up the lowly, it's a social revolution, because it's also a reminder that all that we think about as important, the notions of prestige or power, the I'm better than you, my job is better, I look better, I dress better, come on the subway with me when I go to seminary, I smell better. All of the things that we judge others by are utterly insignificant, because God has loved us and has lived and walked among us. And if God has truly filled the hungry with good things and the rich he has sent away empty, it's an economic revolution from two perspectives, one of which we're starting to get. I love the fact that when you look at this church as decorated now, as simple as it is, it stands because you made the decision that we would bring joy to two families in the area rather than spend money on flowers. How we spend our money, with whom we spend our money, has moral implications. And you made that choice, and be proud of it. That's what Christians do. It's an economic revolution because maybe we're supposed to be a threat to the social order because we stand for something else. So on this Christmas Eve's Eve, on this day of anticipation, and remember, I'm already long past Christmas. When I went to the mail yesterday and picked up the parish mail, the first thing that got to me was the order for palms and the stuff I need for Ash Wednesday. Okay, so I've already left you guys behind. I'm months ahead of you. Welcome to my world. But on this day of anticipation, I call on you all, as you get into the beauty of the celebration, be persons of faith, be persons of trust, be persons who are willing to bring Christ into the world, as Mary did. One of the things New Testament studies remind you, if you have a heart and have a soul, remember, you hear the names of Peter and Paul, you're going to think of great preachers who brought the gospel. You think of the Magi, they bring gifts. Mary can't offer anything except faith, love, and space. If there's anything you as a Christian can give to those you love, if there's anything you can return to God, if there's anything that brings hope into our world, may you bring faith, love, and space. That's what the incarnation is about. So, once again, as I've told you before, I'm not beyond stealing the works of other people, the same things I mark my students wrong for. But I'm stealing this. Many years ago, I read in a book, it was actually a diary of a woman. Her name is Loretta Ross Gata. I don't know. I think it's a translation from another language. But I leave you with her thoughts about the meaning of Christmas. And she does it through the eyes of another woman, through the eyes of Mary. In the end, when all other human gifts have met their inevitable limitations, it is a young woman with a heart in love with God who makes a sanctuary out of her life, who delivers the Christ, who delivers us. May you, with a heart in love with God, make a sanctuary for him in your life. May you deliver Christ, who delivers us.